Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you, my good friends, whatever time of day it is you are watching this video, on whatever means of visual technology you have opted to use. So in this presentation, we're going to take a nice virtual tour of the New York Transit Museum. I myself have been an employee of the New York City subway for the past 13 plus years, operating trains. Since I was a young boy, I've had a bit of an interest in trains and public transportation. It began with the subway, being that I've lived in New York practically my whole life. Later on, after meeting like-minded people, it morphed into buses as well as railroads, both light and heavy rail. Now, way back in 1993, I visited the New York Transit Museum for the first time, and my interest only grew from there. Now, I'm going to take you on a little tour of this museum. The museum is located in downtown Brooklyn at the corner of Boerum Place and Schermerhorn Street. Right across the street is 130 Livingston Street, which houses many offices for my employers at MTA New York City Transit. What we know today as the New York Transit Museum is actually a decommissioned subway station. From April of 1936 to June of 1946, this was the Court Street subway station on the Independent Subway, or IND's, then newly built Fulton Street corridor. Court Street served as a northern terminal for the Fulton Street IND corridor. There was even a plan to connect this station with a newly built 2nd Avenue subway corridor. The aforementioned infamous 2nd Avenue line would not exist until 2017. Even then, it only runs between 72nd and 96th Streets in Manhattan, with connections to the Broadway BMT and 6th Avenue IND corridors at Lexington Avenue and 63rd Street. Getting back to the original Fulton Street IND corridor, the original service pattern was to be the Double H line, which would run between Court Street to a proposed terminal at Euclid Avenue in East New York, making all local stops along the Fulton Street corridor. Instead, the Double H became the Court Street Shuttle, which ran shuttle service exclusively between Court Street and Hoyt-Schermerhorn Streets, which was the very next station southbound. Court Street saw very low usage by the public, mainly because of its proximity to other stations such as J Street and the aforementioned Hoyt-Schermerhorn. On June 1st, 1946, the Court Street station was closed and would remain abandoned for the next 30 years. While it was abandoned to the public, the old Court Street station did serve for many years as a location for movie and television show filming. One of the more famous movies filmed in this location was the original taking of Pelham 123 back in 1974. In 1976, which was the USA's bicentennial year, the old Court Street station was reopened to the public, not for subway service, but for an exhibit. It was the New York City Transit exhibit, which featured retired subway cars, as well as other exhibits dealing with the history of the subway system. The original plan was to keep the exhibit open until September, but it proved to be so popular that it became a permanent fixture. It became what we know today as the New York Transit Museum. And, as they say, my friends, the rest is history. So here we are in 2026, which is the USA's 250th birthday and the 50th anniversary of the Transit Museum. Now, if you want to visit the museum, multiple nearby subway stations serve this area. There's the Court Street Borough Hall Complex, which serves 2, 3, 4, and 5 service, as well as R train service. There's the J Street Metrotech Complex, which serves the A and C lines, as well as the F line and the R. The Hoyt Street Station on the 2 and 3 lines, and the Hoyt-Schermerhorn Street Station, which serves A and C service, as well as G train service. Alright, what do you say we go inside the Transit Museum? So here we are in the mezzanine. The first exhibits we see deal with the construction of the subway. I'm not going to do much talking here, so I'll just let you see for yourselves. Now just imagine what this type of construction was like back in the early 1900s. At least today we have sophisticated machinery. Here's a little video documentary about the subway's construction. Cut and cover was the preferred method of subway construction in New York City. The main reason is because of the geography and geology. Underneath the streets of Manhattan is some of the toughest rock to cut through. Yes, trains did used to run up and down the Brooklyn Bridge. The old BMT Myrtle Avenue elevator terminated at Park Row in Manhattan. Park Row is where City Hall is located. Service to Park Row ended in early 1944. Alright, so let's take a look at the evolution of subway fare control. Let's see some old subway turnstiles. Back before Omni, the Metro card, and even tokens, one used to buy a ticket to ride the subway. This turnstile was introduced for the 1939-40 World's Fair. Ah, the infamous Iron Maiden turnstile. The first high entrance exit turnstile, or heat. You put your token in, and then you push through that revolving door to get in. Now, there is an article at ForgottenNewYork.com which advocates for the return of these as a deterrent to fare beating. I'll leave the link in the description, and I'll let you decide for yourself. (1950s and 1980s turnstiles now. The one on the far left took tokens as well as coins. Oh my god, this is soon to be a relic. When the Metro card was introduced in early 1994, turnstiles like these began appearing everywhere. Now, with the Omni Tap technology, these will become obsolete. As of this recording, these still exist in the system. I don't think we'll be able to say the same a few years from now. So here we have some bus fare collection. Buses began taking the now defunct Metro card back in 1995. Here's some mosaics and other decorations.
You know something? We stayed because of the camaraderie and feeling that, hey, we can make a difference.
It's our responsibility to keep this place open so that the city can function. Everybody else depends on us, police, fire, sanitation, whatever. They're going to have to work too. And if they can, recognize that. So you get really down and
Here we have some keys and tools used by subway employees. Now you see the two skeleton keys, and on the right is a reverse key. Reverse keys are used by subway train operators on pre-new technology trains. They determine the train's direction. Oh, look at this! A tribute to orange seats. Orange seats made their debut in the 1970s and were used on all subway equipment built between the early 70s and the late 1980s. And here we have a mock-up R42 cab. Alright, let's go downstairs to check out some vintage trains. So here we are at platform level at the former Court Street station. The track on the right is A2 track, while the track on the left is A1 track. Now before we take a look at the collection of subway cars, I want to show you something. This is the old tower here at Court Street station. The tower machine is a General Railway Signal Company, or GRS machine. It is a machine that controls the interlockings by way of electricity. The New York City subway used GRS as well as Union Switch and Signal, or US&S machines, the latter of which controlled switches pneumatically while GRS used electricity. The vast majority of the New York City subway towers now use NX push-button machinery, much easier to use. Oh, and in case you're wondering, that model board is live. Yes, those lights represent trains occupying tracks. This model board can see as far south as Kingston and Throop Avenues, 5 stations away, and as far north as Fulton Street in Manhattan. Trains from Manhattan could not access the old Court Street station, however, it was necessary to see the activity on that end. Now, this is what we employees call the bulletin board. General orders, which are defined as a plan placed in effect anytime train service needs to be diverted from its regularly scheduled route due to repairs or other reasons. Now, it says notices and official notices, but it's bulletins and official notices. And the two on the far right are daily assignment sheets. Motormen, now train operators, which I happen to be, and conductors. When I didn't have a steady job, I had to check this thing religiously. The assignment sheets usually come out 2 days in advance. Check out the old-style telephone that dispatchers and tower operators had to use when communicating with other locations. Alright, time to check out some old subway trains. We'll begin on A2 track with 1404, 1273, and 1407. These are BU cars, elevated gate cars, which were used by the old Brooklyn Rapid Transit Company, later Brooklyn Manhattan Transit. BU comes from the Brooklyn Union Elevated Railway, which would later be absorbed by the BRT. These are composite cars, or cars with wooden bodies and steel frames, and they were mainly used on the old elevated lines. They ran mainly on the elevated lines because of the fire hazards associated with wooden cars running underground. These cars are 49 feet long and about 9 feet wide and are about 12 feet in height. 3 of them are here at the Transit Museum. 1273 was built in 1903 by the long-defunct Locomotive Car Company based out of Laconia, New Hampshire. 1404 and 1407 were built in 1908 by another defunct rail manufacturer, the Jewett Car Company, based out of Jewett and Newark, Ohio. Another 6 are preserved at the Shoreline Trolley Museum in East Haven, Connecticut. I hope to someday do a video up there. And another one is on display at the National Museum of Transportation in Kirkwood, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. And here we have car 1612C. This is a Q-type car, or Queens-type car. This is actually a rebuilt BU car. I believe the former number of this car was 1417. This was originally built around 1908 by the Jewett Car Company, but was rebuilt in 1938. While the old BUs had open ends, the Q-types were fully enclosed. These cars were rebuilt specifically for service to the 1939 World's Fair in Flushing Meadows Park. They ran in service on the Flushing IRT corridor, today's 7 line, and on the Astoria BMT corridor, today's N and W lines. Back before 1949, IRT service actually ran to either Flushing or Astoria. These cars were later transferred to the old IRT 3rd Avenue Elevated and would finish out their careers on the old BMT Myrtle Avenue Elevated. Once service on the Myrtle Avenue L came to an end north of Central Avenue in the fall of 1969, the Q-types were removed from service and retired. Today, only 2 still survive, 1612C as well as 1602A, which is at the Trolley Museum of New York up in the city of Kingston. Here's some vintage IRT equipment from the not-too-distant past. This is car 9306, a 1963 R33 World's Fair car made by the now-defunct St. Louis Car Company. Gee, I wonder where they were located. There were 2 types of R33 cars made in the early 1960s. R33 mainline cars, which ran predominantly on the IRT's main line, as well as the R33S, or R33 World's Fair cars, which were primarily assigned to the Flushing IRT, or present-day 7 line. These cars are the standard 51 feet long and are about 9 feet wide. Unlike R33 mainline cars, which were married pairs, R33 World's Fair cars were single units. Only 40 of these were ordered, as opposed to 500 mainline cars. They are known as World's Fair cars simply because the 7 line served the 1939 as well as the 1964 World's Fair. 9306 was actually retired back in 1976 and was immediately preserved here at the Transit Museum. While the others were rebuilt in the mid-1980s, 9306 is as it was the day it entered service. The last of these cars were taken out of service and retired in 2003. Those that haven't been scrapped or reefed have been converted to work motors, mainly rider cars. 6 of these have been preserved. 9327 is at the Seashore Trolley Museum up in Kennebunkport, Maine. The other 5 have been preserved by the Transit Museum: 9306, 9307, 9308, 9343, and 9310. Here we see what R33 World's Fair equipment looked like in its final days, in the infamous Redbird scheme. Here's what they look like interior-wise. As someone who lived along the 7 line and remembers these cars very well, this brings back memories of my younger days. 9310, along with a few others, are still operational and have been used by the museum for nostalgia service, particularly the Train of Many Colors. This is car 5760. This is a 1948 R12 subway car made by the now defunct American Car and Foundry Company. This was the IRT's first ever SME type car. SME is an acronym for self-lapping mechanical equipment. They were also the next to last subway cars to include exterior conductor controls, the caps and triggers. The R14, which was almost identical to the R12, introduced the following year in 1949, were the last to include the caps and triggers. Now, the BMT I&D or B Division's version was an R10, which also debuted in 1948. A total of 100 of these cars were built. Half were equipped with propulsion from GE, while the other half were equipped with propulsion from Westinghouse. Until R33 and R36 World's Fair equipment entered the scene in the early 1960s, R12 equipment ran primarily on the present-day 7 line. The Westinghouse-powered cars were sent to the IRT main line, while the GE-powered cars were sent to the old 3rd Avenue L in the Bronx. The 3rd Avenue L ceased operations in early 1973. As you probably already know, the 1970s was a period of decline for the New York City subway, particularly deferred maintenance and graffiti, and R12 equipment was hit particularly hard. By the fall of 1981, all R12s were retired. Only 2 of these cars have been preserved, 5760 as well as 5782, which is held for the museum up at 207th Street Yard in the Inwood section of Manhattan. As for the R14s, 2 of those were also saved. 5781 is also at 207th Street Yard, while 5944 is now a de-icer car, which is used during cold weather on outdoor sections. And now we get to the 1950s. Here we have car 6239. This is a 1950 R15 model, also built by American Car and Foundry. The car numbers were 5953 to 5999 and 6200 to 6252. Like R12 equipment, half had propulsion from GE, while the other half was from Westinghouse. These cars also spent the majority of their lives on the present-day 7 line, that is, until R33 and R36 World's Fair cars arrived in the early 60s. As soon as that happened, they were also sent to the IRT or A Division main line. These were also the first to have conductor controls inside the cabs. One of their distinct features is a circular storm door window and circular side door windows. By late 1984, all R15 cars were retired from service. This car, 6239, is the only R15 that has been preserved to this day. All others, even those that were used for work train service, have been scrapped. Next, we go all the way back to World War I. Here we have car 4902. This is a 1916 standard low voltage or low V car. This is ancient IRT equipment. Now, this is a trailer car, which means it does not run under its own power. The trailer cars are pulled by motor cars. 4902 was built by the now defunct Pullman Company based out of Chicago. The standard low Vs were built by 3 different manufacturers: Pullman, American Car and Foundry, and the Pressed Steel Car Company based out of Pittsburgh. There were 4 types of low voltage cars: the standard low Vs, Sliver low Vs, Steinway low Vs, which were specifically built for the present-day 7 line, and the World's Fair low Vs. The World's Fair low Vs were constructed in 1938 by the St. Louis Car Company and were used for Flushing IRT service to the 1939 World's Fair, and stayed in service until R15s came along in 1950. In 1921, low-V cars were retrofitted with multiple unit door controls, or MUDC, which means all the doors could be opened from one car. The standard low-V spent most of their careers on the IRT main line. A few of these were also later modified for use on the Franklin Avenue and Culver shuttles in the BMT. Extensions had to be added at floor level because of the wider gaps in the lettered line division. By the mid-1960s, most low-Vs were taken out of service. The last of these saw service on the old 3rd Avenue elevated in the Bronx until late 1969, when the last of them were retired from passenger service. Like the R12, 14s, and 15s, many of these were converted for use in work train service. As of this date, 7 standard low-V cars have been preserved. 4902 is the only trailer car preserved. 5290, 5292, 5443, and 5483 have been preserved by the Railway Preservation Corporation, which is a non-profit group formed to save historic subway cars. Most of their fleet is over at Coney Island Yard. As a matter of fact, the aforementioned low-Vs have been used in nostalgia service as well as special service for opening day at Yankee Stadium. There is a video of them in the short section if you want to check it out. As for the other two, 5466 is preserved at the Shoreline Trolley Museum in Connecticut, while 5600 is at the Trolley Museum of New York. Now, what is this contraption? This is a pump car, car number 56. This is a 1932 R3 pump car built by the now-defunct railroad manufacturer Magor Car Corporation based out of Clifton, New Jersey. It was built for the newly created Independent Subway System, or IND. Pump cars were designed to pump massive amounts of water from the system after a flood. The R3's pump capacity was 2,000 gallons of water, or 7,571 liters for you metric system folks. We've had plenty of instances where the system was flooded. Take Hurricane Sandy back in 2012, right before I got hired. Here's a look inside, just to show you what these look like from the interior. Long Island Railroad equipment in the New York Transit Museum? What gives? This is Caboose C60. It's a 1961 Caboose built by another now defunct company, International Railway Car Company out of Buffalo. The Long Island Railroad, like almost all private railroads in America, used to run freight service. In 1997, freight service was contracted out to the New York and Atlantic Railway, who continues to run freights on LIRR tracks to this day. This Caboose was retired in 2002 and was restored by the Twin Forks chapter of the National Railway Historical Society the following year. In 2009, the Long Island Railroad's 175th anniversary, this Caboose was leased out to the Transit Museum for display for said anniversary. Here's some more old work train equipment. This is a Steeplecab electric locomotive, South Brooklyn Railway No. 5, built in 1910 by both GE and the American Locomotive Company, or ALCO. ALCO, which was based out of Schenectady, New York, was a big name in locomotives from 1901 to 1969. The South Brooklyn Railway is a subsidiary of the New York City Transit Authority. Its right-of-way runs from 38th Street Yard to the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal in the Sunset Park neighborhood. The SBK is mainly now used for either new subway car deliveries or scrap moves. Steeplecab locomotives originated here in the U.S., but have also been used in Great Britain. 3 of these were built for the South Brooklyn Railway, and all 3 are still preserved to this day. As a matter of fact, Locomotive 5, which was renumbered 2002 in the 1960s, is used to move trains in and out of the museum. And we close out A2 track with a still photo. This is locomotive number 10, a 1959 35-ton, single-ton locomotive made by General Electric. Its main purpose was for use in rail grinding or smoothing out rails. In the mid-1980s, this locomotive was used for regular work train service. It would continue to be used in work train service until it was retired in 1996. Locomotive 10, which was renumbered 20007 in the 1960s, is one of two GE 35-tonners built. The other one was scrapped in late 2000 and cannibalized for parts. Now let's have a look at the equipment on A1 track. Now, you see this car is numbered 1776. More on that soon. The actual number of this car is 5240, and this is the 1972 R44 subway car built by the St. Louis Car Company. R44s were purchased for both the New York City subway as well as the Staten Island Railway in the early 1970s. These were the first 75-foot cars to run in service, whereas regular B Division cars are 60 feet 6 inches. In addition, these were the first 4 car sets to run in service. A total of 352 of these cars were manufactured, 300 for the New York City Transit and 52 for Staten Island. The original numbering scheme was from 100 to 466. While the Staten Island cars kept their original numbers, the New York City Transit cars were renumbered during the General Overhaul program. It was in the early 1990s that these cars were overhauled by, wait for it, the now defunct Morrison-Knudsen Company based in Boise, Idaho. One of the features in the overhaul was LCD side signs, which replaced paper roll signs. Back in 1971, R44s were actually tested on the Long Island Railroad main line, where the third rail is 750 volts, as opposed to 600 in the subway. They set a speed record at about 88 miles per hour. By the end of 2010, all R44 subway cars were retired, while Staten Island is currently in the process of retiring their fleet. You see the 1776 number plate. 5240 was actually originally numbered 172. 1776 was actually car 680, while 681 came with a 1976 number plate back in 1976, the year the museum opened. 680 was renumbered 6046, while 681 was renumbered 5613. Both of these cars have since been retired. As for preservation, 5240 is the only R44 that has been saved. Now look at this. This is car 3007. This is a 1992 R110B subway car made by French-Canadian manufacturer Bombardier. The R110B, along with the R110A and the IRT, was a prototype new technology subway car. Only one set of each was purchased simply for testing purposes. It wasn't until the late 90s and early 2000s that new tech trains began regular service, the R142 and the A Division. Only 9 of these were built, cars 3001 to 3009. 3001 was sent to the New York City Police Academy in the College Point section of Queens, where it's used for training. 3004 and 3006 are at Coney Island Yard and are used in fire school training. I myself have been trained on those. 3005 is sitting in the courtyard at our Learning Center, PS 248, in the Gravesend section of Brooklyn. Reportedly, 3008 is on Randall's Island at the New York City Fire Academy. The other 3 were reportedly cannibalized for parts and are currently at 207th Street Yard. And now we go way back in time. This is 2204, a 1915 AB standard car built by American Car and Foundry. These cars were all built within a 10-year span between 1914 and 1924. 950 cars were ordered by the old Brooklyn Rapid Transit, later Brooklyn Manhattan Transit. American Car and Foundry and Pressed Steel constructed these cars. The AB standards were 60 feet in length and 10 feet in width. The majority of these cars ran on the old BMT Southern Division, the Sea Beach, West End, and Brighton Beach corridors. The last of these ran on the Myrtle Avenue Elevated in August of 1969. Along with 2204, 5 of these have been preserved. 2390, 2391, and 2392 have been preserved by the Railway Preservation Corporation and are used for museum nostalgia trips. As a matter of fact, if you look in my shorts section, not in my actual shorts. Come on, get your heads out of the damn gutter. If you look in the shorts section of my channel, I actually filmed these on the Brighton Beach corridor for the parade of trains, while 2775 is at the Shoreline Trolley Museum. This is car 8506. This is a 1961 R30 subway car made by the St. Louis Car Company. This is the B Division version of the IRT's Redbirds. R30, along with R27 cars, were the ones that replaced AB standard cars in the system. 320 of these were manufactured, and about half had GE propulsion, while the other half had Westinghouse propulsion. These cars were married pairs, or pairs of two. The vast majority of this equipment ran on BMT services. In the mid-1980s, the GE-powered R30s were overhauled, while the Westinghouse-powered sets were left alone. All cars were retired in the early 1990s. R30 equipment has been used in many movies such as Carlito's Way, Saturday Night Fever, Money Train, Die Hard with a Vengeance, and the 1998 version of Godzilla, just to name a few. As of this video, only 5 remain standing, including 8506. 8429 and 8558 have been converted to use by the New York City Subway's rail adhesion train, or what we call the gel train. Once those leaves fall, those rails do get a little slippery, believe me. And 8481 and 8522 are up at 207th Street Yard. Now here's a real beauty. Here we see car 8013. This is a 1949 R11 subway car. The R11s, later redesignated the R34s after a mid-1960s overhaul, were dubbed the $1 Million Train. 10 of these were purchased, and each car cost $100,000. They were built by yet another defunct manufacturer, the Budd Company, based out of Philadelphia, which was one of the most famous manufacturers when it came to rail equipment. These were the first stainless steel cars ever built for the New York City subway. They also included new technologies such as underseat heaters and electric door motors, as opposed to pneumatic motors. The R11s were purchased in anticipation of a new 2nd Avenue subway line. 400 were supposed to be purchased, but unfortunately that 2nd Avenue line wouldn't be a reality for another 68 years. The storm and side doors are similar to the R15s, with the circular design. In 1973, these cars were involved in an accident at Coney Island Yard, and about 4 years later, they were retired. 8013 is the only car that wasn't scrapped. Here's a fun fact. This car was featured in the late 2000s TV series Life on Mars. In case you've never heard of it, it only lasted 1 season. If you've ever been on the holiday nostalgia train that runs in December, you might remember this car. This is 1575, an R7A built in 1938 by the Pullman Company. R7 cars debuted in 1937, while R7A cars debuted in 1938. Half were built by Pullman, while half were built by American Car and Foundry. 250 R7s were manufactured, while only 100 R7As were manufactured. Like their counterparts, the R1, R4, and R6, they were made specifically for the brand new independent subway system. They were first assigned to the Queens Boulevard IND corridor, as well as the newly extended Crosstown IND corridor, or today's G line. Between 1933 and 1937, the only stations were from Court Square to Nassau Avenue. In 1937, The crosstown line was extended down to Hoyt Schermerhorn and connected with the Culver Corridor, or today's F line. While these cars mainly served the IND, they spent their final years on the BMT's Eastern Division, or today's J and L lines. In 1977, all R7 and R7A equipment was retired. Only two have been preserved. 1440 is up at the Seashore Trolley Museum in Maine. Now let's talk a little more about 1575 and its livery. It was involved in an accident in 1946. It was overhauled into the prototype for the R10, which happened to be the B Division's first ever SME car. Even though it resembled R10 equipment, it could only be added up to R1 through R9 cars because of the couplers and the braking system. So here is what the IND fleet really looked like. This is R1 Car 100. This was the first car made specifically for the independent subway. This was also the first R-type car for the New York City subway. 100 is a 1930 car built by American Car and Foundry. 300 of these were ordered. For a time they were on loan to the BMT for use on the Sea Beach corridor, as the right-of-way was also used by the city for testing. They made their debut the same day the 8th Avenue IND corridor opened on September 10, 1932. As more lines opened up, more cars had to be ordered. 500 R4 cars were made in 1932 and 33, 500 R6 cars in 1935 and 1936, the 250 R7 and R7A cars we just looked at, and finally 153 R9 cars in 1940. If you're keeping score at home, that's a total of 1,703 cars for the new IND subway. In 1940, the City of New York took over the IRT and BMT and created the system we know today. 9 years later, once R10 equipment arrived, some R1s were assigned to the BMT Southern Division. By the end of 1976, all R1 cars were retired from service. Some did survive as work trains, but even they outlived their usefulness and were scrapped. Including 100, 4 R1 cars have been preserved. 103 and 381 have been preserved by the Railway Preservation Corporation and are used in nostalgia trains, including the Holiday Train. Car 175 is at the Seashore Trolley Museum, but is only used for storage purposes, as its trucks have been removed and the two side doors were removed and installed on a preserved R4 car. Last, but sure as heck not least, we have arrived at our only married pair in the museum. This is car 4029 along with 4028. These are 1966 R38 cars built by the St. Louis Car Company. The R38s arrived just in time for the opening of the Christie Street cut, which was the connection that allowed 6th Avenue trains to access the Manhattan Bridge and also the Jamaica BMT corridor. These cars were actually first assigned to lines on the Queens Boulevard IND corridor, today's E, F, and M and R lines. In the mid to late 1980s, R38 cars were overhauled by GE. Some of the features of the overhaul were the installation of an HVAC system, a new LED flip-dot destination sign on the bulkhead, and the removal of the old marker lights. These cars spent their final years on the A and C lines, and in March of 2009, the last of these saw passenger service. These two cars you see here, 4028 and 4029, are the only R38s left standing. The others have either been reefed in the Atlantic or scrapped, including one pair after a yacht accident in 1972. Alright, boys and girls, so that's all the vintage trains at the museum. We'll close this off with some still photos. I know how much you guys just love those. Here's the old station sign at what was the Court Street station. Back before the 1980s, most station signs, in particular the IND, used the medium typeface font. Helvetica is now the preferred font type. This little white board with black stripes on top is the conductor's indication board. When entering a station, before opening doors, the conductor must point to that board. When that board is in a conductor's window, it means that all of the doors are abreast of the platform. Here's an R1 through R9 truck assembly. This truck weighs 24,000 pounds, or 12 tons. For you metric system folks, that's 10,886 kilograms, or about 11 metric tons. More old station signs. On the left is the standard sign seen on most subway station entrances before, I'd say, about the 1960s. I swear with these, it's like you had to figure out what stopped here and what went where. How did people do it? Thank God more specific ones were made. On the right, I will assume this is from circa 1968. This is all BMT nomenclature. Back in the day, single letters meant that service was express, while double letters meant that service was local. New York City Transit did eliminate the double letters in the mid-1980s. This is an old semaphore signal. The IRT and BMT used these in their early years. Many American railroads also used these until colored lights entered the scene. Some old signs pointing to exits. Court Street itself is 1 block north of the entrance to the museum. The entrance at Court Street itself was more than likely closed the same day passenger service ended at the old station. And here we have some old subway benches. This here is an original mosaic from the 50th Street station on the Broadway IRT corridor. And here's what replaced the semaphore. This is an old automatic signal. An automatic signal is controlled strictly by train movement and not by any tower. Here's a ceramic plaque from Cortlandt Street Station on the long-gone IRT 9th Avenue elevated. This little plaque is of a steamboat, as there was once a ferry depot that carried passengers to Jersey City or Weehawken, New Jersey. And we'll finish off with a signal relay cabinet. These relays basically provide electricity to wayside signals. If any of these fail, that's when we get signal trouble. Signal trouble is the main culprit of delays in the New York City subway. I myself have dealt with malfunctioning signals many times in my career. Signals don't work, trains don't run. It's that simple. Alright my friends, I hope you enjoyed this little virtual tour of the New York Transit Museum. If you haven't had a chance to visit, you really should come down here. It's like walking through subway history. Just remember, the museum is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays and holidays. I do hope to do more museum videos in the future, but for now, thank you for watching. Until we meet again.